In 2014, we released a documentary titled A Voice at the Table. The film received honorable mention at the 2015 SAMHSA Voice Awards. It was a call to action to listen to the voices and lived expertise of suicide attempt survivors, and that led to the next obvious question for me. What's happening with adolescents and teens now who are self-injuring, feeling excessive sadness or depression, experiencing suicidal thoughts, and actually attempting suicide? And what about their parents and caregivers? How do we open that conversation? We spent 2 years listening to young people from 13 to 33. We listened to parents exhausted, frantic, and filled with fear. We listened to parents who have lost children to suicide. We listened carefully to all, but we came away deeply concerned that their voices are still not heard.
So while I know we're doing great work and prevention is wonderful, the national strategy came out a few years back, and one of their goals is to not let someone get to that point of being suicidal, number one, and number two, if they did and they had an attempt, what do we do with them now?
When I first attempted was when I was 12 years old, and that's when everybody found out. And it was obviously really difficult for my family to deal with, especially since I'm a lot younger than most people are when they first experience their depression to that extreme.
I just didn't fit in that crowd that I was surrounded with at all. So the issues kind of slowly came up, and I always felt like I was a little different from everyone. It pretty early on stemmed from that into me thinking, I don't want to be here. I don't know what that meant, but I just knew that I didn't want to be where I was at that moment. Be it school, home, or whatever, nothing felt right.
Who do I call? How do I get this ball rolling? But the problem was that without her being in immediate danger, there's sort of either get on a 6 or 8 month waiting list to be seen in a non-urgent way, or urgent enough, like call an ambulance, get to a hospital. So we really couldn't, there wasn't a middle ground. I didn't want to wait. I didn't think she could, continue progressively getting worse while we waited to be seen.
One of the things that we talk about is how to talk to the young person about it. It's really important to make that connection. One thing I always say to the parents is, don't get upset if they're not talking to you, as long as they're talking to somebody.
When he first came home, I had difficulty in sleeping because he was always awake at night, and I always slept with one eye open. Our fear of letting him go down to his new bedroom that he helped remodel, was that between our room and there was a door closed between us. He will not talk about it with me, never has. He says he will talk about it with other people, but won't talk about it with me.
I think the first time we became aware that Josh was either at least harming himself, whether he was truly thinking at that point about killing himself, I'm not sure. He was in middle school and had a lot of problems with bullying, had changed middle schools with the hope of the new school being better adept at dealing with the bullying, and it wasn't.
I was so young that the doctors didn't really know what to do with me because I was still developing and stuff. But it started to become really problematic when I went back to school afterwards, because I actually lost a lot of my friends because their parents thought I was a bad influence because I self-injured. And so I didn't have any friends in middle school for the majority of middle school because of that?
Looking back, I mean, actually as far as elementary school, there were some little bits of sort of depression and anxiety brewing. I remember comments to my mom and grandmother about different songs that I would say, oh, I totally understand this, I totally feel that. And looking back, they're really depressing songs. Like, oh, wow. My life was not that bad. But, and then continuing into middle school, there was depression, there was some social anxiety, and a lot of body image issues, sort of especially 5th grade into 6th grade was when I sort of started becoming aware of all the pressures of how to look, how to act, how to be around people. So that's sort of where I think everything started for me.
I just want to know, I don't have a microphone because we can't use one in here, but can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great, awesome. I know, I got a big mouth, that's Portuguese in me. Okay, so good morning. My name is Tracy Pacheco Medeiros, and I am a suicide attempt survivor. I'm also a certified peer specialist with the Community Counseling of Bristol County. It turns out that April was looking for someone who can communicate well with youth, got in trouble in school, has lived experience with trauma, self-injury, and suicide, and now a path of hope and recovery. Yeah, oh yeah, that's me. Almost forgot.
Public events like walks and motorcycle runs raise awareness about suicide prevention. But suicide is everyone's business. We need to stop dumping the burden of education and prevention on schools. The entire community needs to step up and take responsibility for our children's well-being by creating a safe, non-judgmental environment for everyone to talk openly about mental health concerns as we do about public health.
I first was very depressed over the anti-Semitic comments and just stuff that was going on in my personal life. That mainly was that I felt upset and I just didn't know what to do, so I thought, why even bother? So I ended up attempting suicide twice within the span of 2 years, just trying to get rid of it, and neither time was I hospitalized because my middle school thought that I would still be fine to go back to school.
Part of my son's discharge from the hospital was that we had to have an intake conference prior to him going back to school. They would not release him from the hospital without that conference being done. So the morning we showed up at the school, we walked into the school and they told us we didn't have an appointment. And they would not let him back into school. And I told him that was impossible because he would not have been released from the hospital without this appointment being pre-made. And we were not allowed to go back to school that day. So the frustration on my face, not only on my son's, you could only imagine after being in the hospital for 11, 12 days.
How I felt through most of it was, well, very scared. In a way relieved that she came and asked for help and I wasn't finding out when it was too late, because I've seen that happen. But it's one of the things in parenthood that you're not prepared for. It's not, we've used this phrase before, it's not in the handbook. So who to ask, when your kid has a cough, you know who to go to. If your kid has a problem with reading, to the teacher. This is outside of the usual boundaries, so I didn't know who to go to, and everyone, it's also something you can't bring up in casual conversation. So you don't realize how many other families have stuff like this going on until someone opens their mouth and says, my child's hospitalized or my child's seeing a therapist or whatever it is. Someone has to be brave enough to say it, and then all of a sudden the other parent starts to go, oh, mine too, or my niece or my friend. Bringing her to the emergency room felt sort of normal because I've had kids with injuries and illnesses. Having her leave in an ambulance in restraints was terrible.
So I had to take a medical withdrawal, which that's when the school got less than helpful, that's for sure, because of course once money comes involved, it's a whole nother mess. I did do the medical withdrawal, but at the same time I had to like make a contract with the school stating that my next semester I would pass all of my classes with full credits, or else they're gonna, pull my financial aid and kick me out of the university, which is understandable. But at the same time, it's like, I kind of came to you guys saying I felt like killing myself. I'm not asking for pity or sympathy, but at the same time, I'd like some understanding. And
when I was on the radio doing a bit about apps that I used for my depression to help with it, I was doing it from the perspective of someone who's recovered, and my mom posted it on her account, and the comments and likes flooded in. Everyone was congratulating me and saying how proud they were of me and how brave I was and how courageous it was for me to talk about it. And at the same time, these were the same people who were scolding me for crying. The same people who were calling me a baby, saying I was being overdramatic and that my problems were small and shouldn't matter as much as they did to me, even though they did. And all of these people were congratulating me for trying to defeat a disease that they pretended I didn't even have, and that they ridiculed me for having in the first place.
In 2015, Bristol County, Massachusetts had 66 confirmed suicides. 2 were African American, 2 were Hispanic, and 1 was Asian. 61 were white. Why the extreme difference in numbers? Is it cultural? I reached out to some friends and asked them to come to the table and share their perspective.
Family and faith definitely play a big role, especially in the African American community. A lot of us are brought up in the church, whether it was a Catholic church, a Baptist church, Protestant, whatever, Pentecostal. We were made to go to church. No matter how strict it was, whether it was like we go every Sunday or you just show up on Christmas and Easter like most people do. It was always something, but either way, God always played a role in your household. But also, I feel like, and this is just my own personal opinion, I feel like a lot of Black families are built for resiliency. Since, there's a lot of things that we do have to struggle with every day just to, be a part of society. We have to battle with poverty and, equal job opportunities and, housing and, the breaking up of the families all the time. And not to say that white families don't go through it too, but we were made to be resilient for those reasons. This goes all the way back to slavery days. I mean, you could be out in, in the field or in the house working, and you still had to, come home and keep your house together or, your family together. So, and you were made to kind of suck it up, and we don't talk about those things, and, you take your lickings and you keep moving. And that's kind of just something that's been ingrained in us, I think, since the beginning of time, is that we are just those kind of people who just find, a way to bounce back from, terrible situations. And so suicide is probably not as common in our culture because of that reason, because we were kind of made to be resilient in tough situations.
When I was in school, you really couldn't tell. At least that's from my perspective, because you really couldn't tell if someone was struggling or not. And that's because, truthfully, everyone talked to each other. Now, the way things are, especially with the way technology is that it's so fast and you can research it so fast. Like if you're a kid and you have a cell phone now, if someone's struggling because they write it on their Facebook wall. Well, we didn't have Facebook. We had what's called, we had normal people. What we did was we wouldn't talk to someone. So if you did see someone that looked kind of weird, you just asked them, everything all right? And then they would talk about it. But the way times have changed, it's scary. For me, it's scary because I have a daughter, and I wonder in 10 years from now, I'm trying to show her the stuff that my parents told me, like if there was something wrong, you tell someone. You don't tell Facebook. You don't tell Twitter. You don't put sad things on Instagram. You talk about it. And that's the dramatic change from when I was a kid to now. When I was a kid, you really didn't notice because people just talked. And it wasn't about talking about someone being sad, or it was just unknown. It was very, very unknown. A lot of people that I went to school with, if they had problems, it was shared problems. And what I mean by shared problems, it was, my dad lost his job. Well, my dad lost his job too. Let's go outside and play. It's because we knew how to cope, we knew how to talk to each other, because we would just tell each other, hey, this is what's going on, and then we move on from it. Now, it's like, it's a burden on a kid.
Now, what I will say is that, with their destructive behaviors as far as getting involved in gang activity, drug activity, alcohol, so they were destroying themselves in different ways. Whether they took their life away because they ended up in prison for the rest of their life for their behavior, or they took their life away because they developed a drug habit or an alcohol addiction. There were different ways, or even just being promiscuous and, running the HIV rates up through the roof. There was many other ways that we were kind of destroying ourselves, but it wasn't in the way of, I'm gonna take my life.
Stigma is nothing less than prejudice and discrimination. We need adolescents and teens to not feel they will be ridiculed or judged for speaking about how they feel. We need to stop labeling self-injury or excessive sadness as attention-seeking. It's a cry for help. And they need to feel safe so they don't keep cigarettes. Young lives are at stake here. We need to listen and really hear their voices.
My sister has a lot of help in school now. Like if she needs to go somewhere else, she has special permission to go, or if she needs like extra time on a test or something, she has stuff like that. I think we should start doing that instead of just for like special needs. Like she's not special needs, but she has like particular needs for her anxiety and things like that. And I think we need more of that for kids, because like when you're depressed, you don't want to do anything. You don't feel like doing your schoolwork. You don't feel like focusing. You don't feel like doing any of that. And we need a place where we can just go to a more friendly or warmer environment instead of like plain white brick walls that are just, I feel like they're closing in on you. You need a place where you can go and just, like breathe. A nice house. But you need like a place where you can go and you can just breathe and then settle yourself back and be like, all right, I know I'm sad, but I gotta get this stuff done, and this is a good place to do that. We need more friendly environments. We need more places we can talk about how we're feeling without being judged, because like it's hard to go to a school psychiatrist 30 minutes once a week to someone that you don't even really know and probably don't even click with, because not everyone clicks with all the psychiatrists at school, and sometimes they're not helpful and shouldn't be helping kids.
Growing up having, psych issues and having, feeling suicidal, which I did a lot, I was judged even sometimes, by my family sometimes, just, because even to this day, like when something happens, like something bad happens to something in my family, or my mom goes to the hospital or something, a lot of times they're afraid to tell me, because they think, oh, if we tell her, she's going to get upset, she's going to do something, hurt herself. And I get that a lot, because even though it's been 6 years and longer since I stopped cutting, to this day, some of my family members are like that.
And what to say to the school, and we weren't the first people to pull a kid out of school for treatment and come back, but you would have thought we were, because they didn't seem to have a protocol for reintegrating into class, and they don't have a very graceful way at our school of if you're being seen in the center that they have upstairs for kids with issues, and you can get some therapy through them and guidance. They just sort of announce to the class, so-and-so to the center, and so now the whole class knows. And this is huge. If you're in high school, you don't want attention drawn to you, especially for a negative thing.
You want to protect your children. You want to make sure they are prepared to deal with what they come up across in life. And that's something that, as just a person, an adult, I don't know how to deal with. And then to try to be leading them is very, very difficult. want to say you gave them the right tools, but then you see the youth we've lost, that you think, they had a pretty good, they had good care, they had good parents, they had a good environment, and still we managed to lose them. And you think, what can I do?
If I could change anything about what was done then, what was, the school's way of handling these issues, I would definitely encourage more awareness of mental health issues in the school. We have big presentations on bullying all the time. We have big presentations on sexual awareness, although I guess that depends what city you're in. We still debate on that. But we never really talked about mental illness except, maybe someone would do something, well, I guess that's not even mental illness, that would be a disability. We never talked about it. We never made it normal. We never made it something you could talk about. School was never an environment where you could say, oh, I have depression, or I have anxiety, or I have this, without getting looks from everyone. And even
Dr. Julie Searle from the University of Kentucky and president-elect of the American Association of Suicidology recently published a study that shatters our old thinking about how many people are impacted by one suicide. Her study showed that realistic number is probably as many as 130, if not more. A few months ago, we sat with 125 teens who were grieving the loss of a friend to suicide, proving her point, and that didn't even include their parents. It's unacceptable that we don't have more programming options in place everywhere to help these kids process their grief and to help them to heal. The Bristol County Regional Coalition has implemented a peer-to-peer wellness check that we know helps kids understand they do matter, they are important, and we want them to stay safe, to stay healthy, to please just stay.
Getting to what I missed. I missed an opportunity. I can remember sitting in the car one day with her at the bus stop, and she told me about a friend who had attempted suicide. And I said, oh, that's terrible. Is he okay? And that's where I left it at. That was it. That's what I missed. I had an opening for a conversation about suicide. I could have told her how devastating it would be to a family. Everybody you know, all your friends, it affects so many people. What I want to say to everybody is please have that conversation. You have a son, a daughter, a sibling, cousin. Talk to them about it. I don't want any other family to be devastated like mine. Please don't miss that opportunity. Take that opportunity and talk. Thank you.
We have to keep fighting the fight and do the prevention work and do the post-vention work as well. But we also need to do the intervention piece and not forget about that, because I get anxious about the crisis centers and hospitalization being the only options. They need to be able to do it on a community-based level or a school-based level, because that's where they belong and they feel a part of. And taking them out of their situation and putting them somewhere else not often helps. And then you put them right back into the situation without any supports. We don't want to set these kids up to fail. We want to put good supports around them. We want to increase their protective factors. We want to decrease their risk factors. And until there's less suicides in young people in this country, I think I'll be fighting the fight.
You matter, my life matters, your life matters, and you are important to me.
I want you to turn to the person beside you and say, "You matter," because you all matter to me.